In this video, we're going to have a look at square numbers and square roots. Square numbers are numbers multiplied by themselves. We can express them in index notation. 1 times 1 is written as 1 squared, being 1. 2 times 2, 2 squared. 3 times 3, 3 squared, etc. The list of square numbers are really useful to get familiar with, and you can obviously keep going. Now, square roots are the opposite of squaring. You ask yourself what number is multiplied by itself to give the number under the square root. For instance, if we had the square root of 1, this being the square root symbol, what number multiplied by itself gave 1? Well, that was 1. The square root of 4, what number multiplied by itself gave 4? Well, that is 2. What number multiplied by itself gave 9, 3, etc. Let's have a look at an example using area. Let's take an actual square. And let's say the unit length is 6. The area of the square can be given as 6 times 6 or 6 squared, being 36. The length of a side can be the square root of the area, being 6. So they're reverse of each other. Now, multiplying two square numbers is quite interesting. Let's take the example 3 squared times 5 squared. What we've got here is 3 times 3 times 5 times 5. Let's pair these up differently and say 3 times 5 times 3 times 5. That is, we could write 3 times 5 squared, or 15 squared. I'll do one more example and then we'll come up with a rule for this. 8 squared times 7 squared. We can write it as 8 times 8 times 7 times 7. We can pair them together, 8 times 7 times 8 times 7, or 8 times 7 squared, which is 56 squared. Oops. So there's actually a rule we can write for when we're squaring two numbers. The product of square numbers is equal to the square of the product. That is, if we have any number squared times another different number squared, we can write it as the product squared. Let's have a look at square roots. The square root of 100 can be rewritten as 25 times 4. Let's try square rooting these separately. Square root of 25, will this work? We know that the square root of 100 is 10. If we split it, the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 4 is 2, we get 10. So the square root of a product of a square number is the product of the square roots of the original number. That can kind of get confusing, but let's write it as a rule. Let's say we have the square root of a number squared times a different number squared. We know that the answer can just be A times B. Now, don't get too worried about these rules. We'll come back to these type of rules when we look at algebra down the track.